You're listening to the Right Ordered Life podcast, episode number 12. Suffering in this life is inescapable, but it's not pointless. Even when it hits like a tidal wave, there's a path to beauty, purpose, and healing. Today's episode is very special as my guest, Jessie Torres, and I talk about trauma, forgiveness, and healing. But I have to warn you, we get very raw and emotional, and some of the topics that come up are not for little ears. Welcome, my friend. We're going into the deep on today's episode so you can turn your pain into power. I'm Stacy Santiago, and I'm here because I see you. If you're hearing my voice right now, chances are you're disappointed, grumpy, and honestly sick and tired of not having the time and energy to do it all. Here's the deal. I know that most days it feels too hard to be a good mom who successfully keeps her family and job going. It's normal to feel this way. I've been exactly where you are. As a board-certified coach and licensed professional counselor, I've helped hundreds of clients connect with God, be happy at home, and do meaningful work without running out of time or energy. When you tune in each week, you're going to learn proven tools to live a right-ordered life of faith, family, and purpose that you want to wake up to each day. My guest today, Jessie Torres, is very special to me. She was one of my coaches in a business program I completed a few years ago. Not only is she a highly trained peak performance and transformation coach, she's got the biggest heart you'll ever find. Jessie's like popping a pill of pure love. She will take the fiercest stand for you and speak clear words that open your heart and mind in new ways. Listen up, because I know you'll find power and inspiration in her personal story, passion, and wisdom. It's an absolute joy to be able to share a little Jessie with you today in hopes that you'll be able to see more beauty, truth, purpose, and even goodness in the suffering you encounter in your life. Ready? Let's dive in. Hey, Jessie.
Hello.
Welcome. I am so thrilled to have you here. Just so excited because you may know you're one of my favorite people. So,
Well, likewise. I'm super honored and excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
yes. And we've got this interesting topic today, and we're going to go a lot of places with it. But just to kind of preface for people is, we're going to get real here because suffering is real and pain is real. And we don't often talk about that much, even with our closest friends. And so I want to acknowledge that we live in this broken world where this pain, the suffering is inescapable. We will go through things like injury, illness, loss of a loved one, job loss, divorce, victim of a crime. You name it, there's going to be these tidal waves that hit us. But our suffering isn't pointless if we don't let it be. And we don't have to stay broken in that. And so, Jess, you're an expert on many things. Certainly love and healing and definitely transformation after pain. And so would you like to share some of your story about the painful events in your life?
Sure. Sometimes I feel like it's a loaded question. And I'm like, okay, where do I begin? And I want to preface, as I share this, that with every bit of my journey, there is only forgiveness and love. And when I speak on some of the traumatic events of my life, that at this stage of the game, I only feel love for the people involved or the people included. And I have forgiveness in my heart. And I understand from my perspective that all is in divine order, even when it really sucks. So um, my parents both came here from Peru. They were immigrants from Peru, and they became citizens and um, had me and had my brother. My mom didn't realize that my dad was married prior. And she actually ran away from Peru to come here and get away from him because he wasn't only married, he had 3 kids, had 2 kids, one on the way. And so she was devastated. He came out here, said, I left her, I want you, married her. And he hadn't really divorced her. He was married in Peru and to my mom here in America. And from that, the evolution of our lives started to happen. And for me, I have had sexual abuse with my father since my first memory. I don't have a memory without it. All the way up until I was 18, and I wanted to get out of the house. Problem with this is that I idolized my dad. Like I loved him. I thought I was special. I thought I was, why does he take me to adult parties? He's supposed to take my mom, and why does he want me sitting next to him? And I didn't understand. I was a little girl. But fast forward in the future, I used to condemn that part of me. Like, why didn't I fight harder? Why didn't I, kick, scream, or whatever? And I used to judge myself so profoundly because of that happening. I anchored in me that I'm now dirty and filthy and no one will ever want me. Right. So now I was like, oh, wow, my life is ruined. Why didn't you fight harder? And so it's just interesting to see the dynamics of how we judge ourselves when we were little and we didn't know better. From that, I really, when I turned 18, I rebelled. I wanted to just, it's like, you can't tell me what to do now. I'm an adult. You want me home at what time? 10? Okay, I'll be home at midnight. And I just literally decided that I was going to call my own shots. From that, I met a guy, and he had come out of the military, and he was actually engaged to marry a German lady that he had met overseas. But we became friends, and he said he fell in love with me the minute he saw me. But I thought he was getting married, and I was also choosing a boy that was Cuban, and he was a dancer and a DJ and a bad boy. And I chose him to be the one that would take my innocence. And from my perspective, my dad had already done that, but he was everything my dad hated. So somehow he was going to be the first boy that I would ever allow. And it's again weird how delusional we get that I'm going to choose you to punish my dad when it's really me I'm hurting, right? But that's kind of the process. And throughout that process, realizing that this gentleman and I, just started to really come together and fall in love. So he had come from an abusive relationship with his mother. She was an alcoholic. He was the youngest of four, the only boy, and she was really brutal in her abuse. And then we decided that I was 18 and he was 21, and he decided that no, my kids will never see me drink. And I said, my kids will never be molested. And we thought we fixed it. So I told my mom I wanted to move out because at 18, my dad was still coming after me, and she didn't understand. I tried to tell her when I was 16, and she just ignored it. Not because she was callous, but because he twisted my words and convinced her, because molest in Spanish, molestar means to bother or annoy. So he made it seem like that's what it was. And she never talked with me about it again. And so I had gotten to that point now at 18 where it's just like, you don't see me, you don't understand. I got to get out of here. But my mom was, just very much, she's very religious, very Catholic, and that's totally fine. But from her perspective, I couldn't live with a man and not be married. So when I said, okay, I'm moving out, I moved out Monday and we were married Friday.
Mm.
She bought the rings. I mean, and we were just like two young kids in love. And I think he asked me to marry him that morning. And we got married by Justice of the Peace in LA. And what proceeded to happen from there was 18 and a half years of mental, verbal, emotional abuse, to the point that I became just an apathetic body walking. I was praying that somebody would blow the red light and take me out. I couldn't be in this anymore. I didn't know how to fight this. I just thought that this was what it was, and divorce wasn't an option. Um, and I kept promising that I would stay with him. He never believed he deserved me. And so I would promise, I would promise, I would promise, no, I'm going to stay with you till I die, stay with you till I die. And I believe that I did so many times where I felt like he was just stabbing me, stabbing me, stabbing me, not literally, but verbally, emotionally. And I just died in every way I could. And I came to that point where I was praying for, you know, the plane to crash if you went on a trip, and then having massive guilt over that. Like, how could I be such a horrible person to think such a thing? But I didn't know a way out. And through the process of in my marriage, there was a year where in 4 years, and not in 4 years, in a year span, four people died in our family. And we had like hadn't had intimate relationship with death at this point. My kids were little; they were 6 and 4, and his sister committed suicide. And then his uncle, who worked on the Puget Sound in Washington, stepped on a shipyard where he worked, and those big ball and hook cranes literally fell on his head. They were all bizarre. And his partner, my ex was a LAPD officer. His partner on bike duty sat down and watched a John Wayne movie after work, had an aneurysm, and died at 38 years old. And then the following year, my brother was murdered.
Mm.
So it was this bizarre like sequence of tragedy. And, here his sister committed suicide. I'm like, I can't even fathom, and he was like, you have no idea. You can't even fathom what I'm going through. And then a year later, I was going through the same thing. So it was very tumultuous. And I think that the more that happened, and the more I would speak up, the more harsher he got. And it just became this dynamic of if I even tried to defend myself or if I tried to speak, and he would tell me like, don't ever let anybody walk all over you, Jess, not even me. And I'm like, okay. But then when he would, and I'd go to talk to him, it became 10 times worse. So I learned to just keep my mouth shut, keep my mouth shut. And part of it too was my father, when he was um, coming into my room at night, if I fought him off or I did something where it didn't work, he would punish my mom and my brother. And so as a little girl, I owned responsibility of the joy in the home or
Mm.
the lack of it. Because it wasn't me he punished, it was them. And so I knew that the next time he came, if I fought him off, they would suffer. So I learned to just suck it up. And so that became what I took into my marriage in 18 years, just not standing for myself and just basically being a doormat and just allowing these things. So kindness is something that completely changed my life, which I'll get into a little bit later. But from that, I got a divorce, and because people, I guess I'll talk about it now. Like people in a course that I took were kind to me, and I had no idea what this was. My dad had told me that people want to get into your pants, so don't trust anybody. I couldn't even sleep over my cousin's house. My ex told me that people subconsciously want to break up a good thing. So don't talk about our marriage to anybody, Jess. And I was like, okay, so when these people behaved kind to me, I I had no it short-circuited me. I was like, I don't understand. You're doing this for me and you don't want anything in return. And it was a class I was taking every Saturday. So what I knew is I didn't understand, I didn't know to put kindness around it, but I just knew that this feeling came over me and I couldn't wait to be at that Saturday class because something came alive. And at my home I was dead. And I realized that I thought, if this feeling, whatever it is available, then life is worth living. And it gave me the courage to get out of my marriage. And that turned into a sequence of anger and rage, but it also created an unsatiable hunger for me to seek understanding of the human experience. Why did my dad, do what he did? Why did my mom ignore it? Why did my husband do what he did? And why did I allow it? And I started to read books and go to workshops or anything that I could attend in my own survival because I was terrified. I was 38 years old at the time, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't even know who I was or what was my favorite color. I had no idea. I never had asked myself. I was only who I needed to be to keep peace in the house. And now, fast forward, just kind of cutting through some corners here. As of recently, this January, right now, November 14th, my younger brother was killed. And so you start to look through the lenses of, if, and my belief is that God has a plan and everything is in divine order and it always happens for our highest and greatest good, even the suck, then what possible could you, want for me in this moment? But it wasn't always like that.
Mm.
That's a little bit of a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I know many of the things that you said are going to resonate with our listeners. And this is a big real topic. Tell me, what challenges or what even mistakes do you see women encounter in those fresh moments of pain and heartache?
Well, it's interesting, tragically having the comparison of both my brothers being murdered. When my brother Oscar died, and he was my older brother, that was 29 years ago now. Um, I turned my back on God. So in that moment, I didn't know what I believed. I just thought, I was angry and I flipped God off. I was literally like, I have no idea if you even exist. What if there is no God? And what if you just get buried 6 feet under with worms crawling out of your eye hole? That's literally what I said when I was screaming at the sky, because it's like, how dare you, was like my language, how dare you rip the sky open and not and take my brother from me without even a moment to say goodbye or just a second chance or anything. Like, it just done one day from the next. And so I was seeking understanding around it. And I think sometimes the most important thing that we do as women, as we internalize our pain. At that time, my kids were 6 and 4. So I have to be a mama. I have to get back to doing stuff. I have to keep the household going. I can't sit in my sorrow. Um, but what happens with that is that we internalize it and we keep it inside and we don't share it. We don't talk to anyone about it because we're just like, take it on and we got to keep going and keep going. And what ended up happening for me was I was on my way to work one day, and this song came on the radio. I'll never forget it. It was by Richard Cliff, I think is his name. And it's that traditional song, I can see clearly now the rain is gone. For whatever, I can see all obstacles in my way. The way the song came on, it's like something unlocked and I lost it. I was hysterical. I was bawling. I was literally, I had to pull off the freeway. And this is back in 1993. So I had to pull over and find a phone booth and call my husband at the time. And he was like, what do I do? Do I call 911? Because I couldn't even speak. I was so hysterical. And so I invite that you don't internalize that, even though you do have to pick up the pieces and go on, that you recognize that there's a human being that needs your love, that needs a moment to grieve and to feel. Because I kept stuffing it down, it just came up almost. I hate to use the term, but it's what it felt. It just barfed up. It just, I had no control, and it came in a moment. And I remember going to work and asking my boss, and I couldn't even talk hardly to her. Of course, she felt horrible and gave me the day off, but I was just it gets back to you. So I think one of the common mistakes we make is we internalize and we don't talk about it, and we try to keep going and we don't allow or give ourselves a moment to feel. Um, we don't want to handcuff ourselves to the sorrow. So I always say, put a clock on it. Like, give yourself, like I told my mom too, like she's navigating her emotions and she's doing differently this time as well. And she's like, I don't want to stay in bed and cry all day. And I'm like, that's great. I love your awareness around that. That's a choice your body's wanting to make. And I want to give you permission to give yourself, sometimes maybe you take a day and you just do nothing and you just feel, and that's okay. Just don't make that a daily habit. So I think it's super important to be expressive, journal, write down your feelings or emotions. Also talk to people, seek help, community, or your spouse if they're open to holding that space for you, um, or girlfriends or anyone. If you don't have anyone, there is community. There's always some help that you can reach out to help support you and hold you in that space.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Completely. I love that. And, it's when you hold on to something inside and if you try and suppress it, you prevent yourself from being able to identify what it is you're afraid of. And
Mhm.
so that fear becomes your prison guard. And I talked to a client about this once, and she was able to drill down to what she was afraid of. And she said, if I feel If I feel this, then I'm afraid I won't have any hope and I can't live without hope. And there's that fear, but you can't break free from that unless you process. And so I love that you brought that up because that's just so key.
Yeah, it's so important, because what we don't realize is that she's believing that she won't have hope, but she's accepting fear instead. Right. So it's like, well, I'll hold on to this fear because somehow it keeps hope alive. But this is affecting you in ways you don't even recognize. What we don't realize is that that unhealed wound shows up in ways that we don't link the two, right? We're, short tempered with our kids, or, we show up kind of just grumpy at work, or, there's all these things, and we don't realize that that festering fear or hurt is the one at the helm of your behavior. And so we think, no, 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 I'm good. No, I did. I journaled. I'm fine. And it's like, no, unless it's really given its time, it's going to keep, like I say, tugging at your shirt. Like, no, no, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. I need you to see me. And so it's super important to not bypass.
Mhm. And to know that it doesn't mean you're weak, that you
Yeah.
can't handle it, that you're gonna need help. So that means you're too weak and you're not enough. It doesn't mean any of that. So it's the meaning around that is really important to shift.
You know what's so important about what you just said is that it takes a lot more strength to look at it, right? So we think it's weak to express and feel our emotions. It takes more strength, more courage, more bravery to actually say, okay, let me look at it. So I hope that anyone who's listening really hears that, because it is a myth to believe that when we express our feelings and we cry, or we scream into a pillow, that that is a sign of weakness. It takes a lot of courage to look in the mirror as to what is hurting you inside.
Yes, it absolutely does. And to ask for help too.
Hmm.
That's the that is the stance of courage.
Yes,
So yes, absolutely. Process, feel, and ask for help.
very much. And as high achievers, or women that were taking care of it all, and I know for me, it's been a practice of learning how to ask for help.
Mhm.
So it is a process. We just like, no, no, I got it. I got it. I can take care of it. I got it. I handle it. And it's like we need to stop, because I know women are exhausted, right? It's like we've tried so hard to prove we could do it all, that now we've literally gotten to a place where we don't know how to ask for help.
Yeah.
And then we actuate our own exhaustion.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Tell me more about this, about leaning on God. How do we do that even when we don't understand and even when we might be angry?
Yeah, great question. Here's the thing. Faith is not tangible. I can't touch it. I can't pick up faith and touch it. It's an inner knowing. It's a belief. Like I said, when my first brother died, I turned my back on God, and I was angry. But I believe a soul absent of faith is a soul that is slowly dying. Like there is something greater than us that's telling our heart to beat, and to be benevolent and to be kind. And so when adversity hits, or we are hurt in some way, if we have faith and we trust God, and that God is for us and with us, then even in the adversity, there is something there for us to gain. And so I tell people, in the moments when you're knocked to your knees, if God could whisper, like, hey, Stacy, I know this really sucks right now, but if you knew why I need you to build resilience, you would understand. If you knew what I have waiting for you in the future, you would understand why I need you to build this courage muscle right now. And so we don't get to know, we just get to show up and trust that God has our back, and that it is all in divine order with absolute precision. So, with my younger brother now, um, I am leaning on God and my faith and my belief that everything happens for our highest and greatest good, even the suck. Like we have to understand that there is dark and light, there is good and bad. This is the polarity of life. We don't know light without dark. And so sometimes when our those moments that our knees hit the floor is the moments that we show ourselves what we've got. And maybe that desire, like I'm in this stage, I'm asking God, what if I'm meant to not have my brothers here, then and I'm meant to live, what is in it for me? How do I turn this pain into purpose? How do I just alchemize this into something good? And for me, maybe it's understanding, the mind of like, I'm thinking this gentleman that shot my brother, like what happened in his life that caused him to believe it was okay to take someone's life? Like what went on in his childhood, in his journey, and I'm like, I'm a student. I want to understand it. And maybe I can utilize it to help others, right? And to help others not have to make those kind of choices. How do we stop the chain of abuse so that we don't perpetuate it? Because most of the time you see someone's behavior has a line of a parent abusing them, and that person has a child abuse in their journey, and it just becomes this trickle effect. And so again, if I'm looking at it from the perspective of God, I'm like, I'm in prayer, I'm in ask, and I know, God, that you called your warrior back home and that he's at peace. And I know that he's in your hands. And I believe that. It hurts me because I want my brother. But if this is something that is in grand design, then I know that there's some beauty. And I'll share some of the beauty with, well, both my brothers, but my older brother, there was over 300 people at his funeral, people that I didn't even know. And all of a sudden I realized how many lives he had affected. And so I know that in his life, he affected that many people. I know that his death also affected. Maybe those people will love their families harder. Maybe they will forgive faster because they saw this tragic event from a gentleman that was so kind to them. And with my brother, my younger brother, he was, in a motorcycle club, and he was in areas that weren't that good, but in his element, he was the light. They posted on Instagram, videos of the crime scene, and so people that knew him in the community were posting on there. No, not him. Oh my God, he helped me this, he helped me that, and at a time that I needed the most, And I'm just reading all these things, and I even have like notes. I'm like, and I'm looking. I'm like, this right here is a document front and back in his handwriting of how to raise a good daughter.
Mm.
And so I'm just like, this right here is quotes that he liked, that he pulled out of books, like, tough times never last, tough people do. Good morning, this is God, I will be handling all of your problems today, I will not need your help, so have a miraculous day. It's just like all these things, and I'm like, wow, like look at how many people were impacted by his death, and not only his death, but the way it happened. Again, if I'm trusting God, he wasn't meant to die of natural causes. He wasn't meant to live to 80 years old. If that was the truth, and I'm trusting God's plan, then I'm going to look for the good. I'm going to look for the good. And I love this quote by Mr. Rogers. He says, and if you're not ancient like me and you don't know who Mr. Rogers is, look him up. He is someone that had a TV show years ago for children. And when 9/11 happened and there was so much chaos, a lot of parents were watching the news. The planes hit the Twin Towers over and over and over again. And it was just playing on every TV. And the children were scared. And so he would get down at their level and he would look at them and he would say, whenever there is chaos, there is always helpers. Look for the helpers. And in 9/11, if you look for the heroes, the firefighters that ran into the fire, that ran into the building to help. How many firefighters did we lose because the second bomb went off, or but I mean, but they valiantly went in to save people. Like that's beautiful. Yeah, is it tragic that they're having to run in there because there's an explosion? You bet. But how beautiful in their heart they're going in there to serve humanity in the way that they know how. And so if we can lean on God and you know, understand that every individual has their personal contract with God, and we trust, then we can surrender that disbelief and look for the gift. Look for the gift. And I'm not saying don't be angry. I get it. I felt rage. I felt rage at all of it. But because I was able to lean on God, I was able to be witness to the human parts of me that were angry. Because as human beings, we're angry, but we're also a spirit. And if our spirit connects to God, it can allow our human experience to be in sorrow, to be in anger, because those are true feelings, to have them be expressed and to love them and then lean on God again. That's the way that we can soothe ourselves and we can come out of massive amounts of grief. And look, I have been a study of what I'm even saying right now, right? And I've taken myself to the worst case scenario. And I thought, okay, if I believe that everything happens for our highest and greatest good, even the suck, and that everything is in divine order, what would I feel if my son was taken? Because that's my greatest fear. My greatest fear is that I lose a son. And trust me, when my brother was gone 29 years ago, I was so afraid that my mom's destiny was going to be mine. And I lived with that fear for a while. You know, I got to get my kids over 29 years old because that's what the age my brother was. If I could just get him over that hump, I can feel good. It was just this weird thing we adopt. And, you know, I took myself mentally to what if I lost a child? And I took a deep breath and I leaned in and trusting that if that was God's design, and maybe it isn't God's design, but it is God that I'm going to lean on. It is God that I'm going to pull to, and understanding that if you needed my son back home with you, that I'm going to be a leader for my two other children, and I'm going to be strong, and I'm going to continue, and I'm going to be the best version of me in this lifetime so that others don't have to suffer. A
Mhm.
long answer to your question, but I think it's an important one.
Yeah, and that trust, like you're saying, that trust is key. And even if you can't get yourself in that moment to 100% trust, which is totally understandable, it opens the door to you starting to ask these better questions, which helps you to see it in a different way. Oh, how could this be an opportunity? How could this be of some good? Where
Mhm.
might this lead me? How could God be calling me to show up in this? Because there is something. There is going to be next step, a next step, a next step. And as we say in Romans 8:28, God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. And that we hold on to. And that suffering does draw us closer to God if we allow it to be redemptive. It helps us to have compassion for other people. It helps us to give God just this gift in return as something that he can use to redeem others that we will never see in this life or know. But sometimes we are just the blind tool, and that's okay too. If it's for love, it's for God's glory. There is good, and bottom line, there's got to be that trust.
Yeah, and I think the important thing too is to not underestimate yourself, anyone who's listening, the power that you have to serve another human being. So sometimes when we go into our grief, we are embraced by it and we say, and we don't think it's affecting others, but you are loved, you know, by your children, by your spouse, by family. Even, you know, if you're a regular Starbucks visitor and that you the Starbucks lady that sees you every day, like your ability to be kind to that person matters, right? So I believe kindness saved my life. The people that were kind to me will probably never know what their kindness did, because at the time I didn't know to express it or say it. It just opened something in me. It unlocked a desire to live. And that was because they were kind. That it's that simple. Sometimes we feel we don't matter. Who's going to care if I just sleep all day? You know what? There are people that love you. There are people, and again, even if you don't know it, people that love to see your smile every day at the Starbucks counter or the grocery store or whatever. Like, you have impact. And I believe if we live by God's design, we are meant to be benevolent to each other. We are meant to love each other and be love. The expression of love is the expression of God. And if that's true, we can't do it when we're handcuffed to our sorrow or handcuffed to our anger or our rage. When we, Byron Katie is a great author. She says, when you argue with reality, you lose 100% of the time. And so if the reality is my brother is no longer here, being angry and saying that shouldn't have happened is an argument. It's an argument with what is. And if you say that shouldn't have happened, well, it should have, because it did. And if it did, then how could I find the good? And how can I choose to show up? I think what's important to acknowledge too is the questions we ask ourselves. We are a product of the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves. And when we are saying things like, why is this happening to me? There is a voice, this gremlin or this saboteur or this supervillain or whatever you want to call it in our mind that will show up to tell us. Why does this happen to you? Well, because you weren't nice when you were a kid, or you're just getting payback, or whatever stuff that mindset wants to tell us. And so we have to be mindful and have a gatekeeper at our minds as to the questions we ask ourselves. So instead of, why does this happen to me? Or, like, my question would always be, what is wrong with me? When I couldn't figure out or something went wrong, I'm like, God, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get this? And that part of me shows up to tell me, well, let me tell you what's wrong with you, Jessie. You never follow through. You're disorganized. You're this, or whatever the voice wants to tell me. So I shift it, right? What is the good in this? And if it's hard for you to believe there could be good, ask yourself, what could be good about this? Right? What's the gift? What's the opportunity for my growth or expansion? What's the muscle God is calling me to build in this moment? Maybe how you handle the situation is an example to your child or to a spouse who doesn't know how to get out of it. Or maybe it's going to be down the road when your child is now a teenager and they, God forbid, teen suicide is up like crazy. They have to experience some kind of death in their teens. My children did when they were in high school. One of their friends died in a car accident. And so they had to be faced with death. And now you have the ability to talk to them about it because you've experienced grief. We don't know. But if you trust God and you trust the design and that He is for you and that things don't happen to you, but for you, then you can start to look for those gifts, and they show up in serendipitous moments or in times where you realize that you have something to say about it because you've experienced it, and you experienced it with grace.
Yes, and I think this is what's coming to my mind. If we're gonna distill this into a nutshell, a takeaway for our listeners here is, even if you just come back to this statement, I have a choice, that will help you to move forward, to make those choices, because you are not trapped in your thoughts. You are not trapped in your emotions. You are not trapped in the situation. But if you can get yourself to remember, I have a choice, that means you have a choice to feel and to express your emotions. You have a choice to get help. You have a choice to trust God. You have a choice to ask yourself the better questions. What good can come from this? You have those choices, and you have a choice for who you're going to be and how you're going to show up, even if all you can figure out is the choice you're going to make in the next 5 minutes, and then you make another choice. You have those choices. And that is just, I mean, if we're going to give a roadmap, that's a roadmap to rebuilding.
Very much, very much. And I would like to sprinkle prayer on top of that. Um, Pray, ask, breathe. In the moments where it feels the strongest, just stop and breathe and recalibrate to your heart center, wherever you feel God resides in your body, and ask. Just take a breath and just ask, Lord, help me through this moment. Give me the courage, right? Help guide me, or whatever it is, or, help me understand whatever it is that you're needing in that moment. Pray. Sometimes it's just support. Just support me as I navigate through this. Hold me. Call on angels. Like I when I've had different times of adversity, I looked up at the sky and I'm like, all hands on deck. Everyone, all of you, angels, God, Jesus, I'm like, everyone. Like, I need you right now. Everyone, pay attention. All hands on deck. This is a challenging moment, and and I got to tell you, it doesn't disappoint.
Yeah.
It doesn't disappoint. So as you're taking that moment and acknowledging that you have a choice, pray, ask God for guidance, ask God to help you make the right choice. I say a little tiny prayer before I come on here. And I ask that I be guided to say whatever the audience needs to hear, that something in my words lands so that you make a different choice, a choice that pulls you out of the pain and turns it into a deeper conviction to serve humanity, a deeper conviction to forgive faster or love harder, and to show up differently in the world, because life is precious and it isn't a given that we're going to have tomorrow. We just don't know. So if you can live your life as though it was your last day, how would you choose to live it? We take it for granted. And when you start to see through those lenses, it makes life a whole lot richer and a whole lot, as my daughter wants to make up the word funner. It makes it a lot funner, you know?
Yes, yes, I love that. And my dear listener, I want to leave you with this quote here. The shock of sorrow comes only to those who think this world is fixed and absolute, that there is nothing beyond. They think everything here below should be perfect. Hence, they ask questions. Why should I suffer? What have I done to deserve this? Maybe you did nothing to deserve it. Certainly, our Lord did nothing to deserve his cross, but it came, and through it, he went to his glory. And that is a quote by the Venerable Fulton Sheen. Thank you so much, Jessie, for sharing all this with us today. Just unbelievably powerful and helpful and shifting. Like, we're just off to live life at a new level now. So thank you so, so much for that. And listeners, if you would like a little gift from Jessie, she has a 10-step guide to having freedom and claiming the life you deserve. And I will be linking that in the show notes along with her website and how to reach out to her if you would like to connect with her. As I'm sure any takeaways that you have from this that you would like to share, I'm sure she would love to hear it. Thank you so, so much, Jessie. So much love for you.
Awesome. Me too, my friend. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. All right, my friend. If this episode inspired you in any way, do me a favor and scroll down inside of your Apple app right now to where it says write a review. I want you to tap that little button and write your biggest takeaway from this episode. It can be really simple. You can say something like, oh my gosh, I just finished episode 12 with Jessie Torres, and wow, this really has me thinking differently. And then share what your biggest takeaway was. Short, sweet, it'll take you less than a minute. And what that will do is help me get Jessie's message of healing out to more listeners who need it. Now, coming up next week on the show, we're asking a tough question. How do I know if my life is bearing good fruit? It's easy to get so caught up with daily challenges and running on the task treadmill that we lose our sense of meaning. And if you're anything like me, you've had at least one moment when you've wondered if your life is having a positive impact and if it's enough. So next week, I'm going to walk you through 5 signs that your life is bearing good fruit so you can see if you're making the progress and impact you desire. And if not, no worries, because we're also going to talk about how to produce more fruit. So go share the show with your friends and let them know that's coming up next week, and invite them to tune in with you and learn how to connect with God, be happy at home, and do meaningful work. I'll see you back here next week, my friend. And until then, celebrate that you are one step closer to living your right ordered life.